My former boss banned me from entering, but my father owns the place. Tyler Johnson adjusted his tie for the third time as he walked toward the Grandeur Hotel in the heart of New York City. His life had changed dramatically over the past 2 years, going from a job where he was constantly humiliated to building his own consulting firm. Today would be the most important day of his career, a meeting with investors who could change everything. It was when he spotted that familiar face at the hotel entrance that his heart raced. Richard Harrison, his former boss, now wore an elegant grey suit and a golden badge on his chest that read General Manager. The cruel smile forming on the older man's face was exactly the one Tyler remembered from the worst days of his professional life. "Well, look who decided to show up," Richard said, blocking Tyler's path with an outstretched arm. "You must be lost, young man. This establishment isn't for just anyone." "Richard, I have a meeting scheduled here," Tyler replied, trying to keep his voice steady despite the knot in his throat. "It's a business matter." "Business?" Richard let out a loud laugh that echoed through the marble lobby. "You? The same kid who could barely organize a schedule when he worked for me?" Other guests began glancing in their direction. Tyler felt his face grow warm, but he took a deep breath. He couldn't let the situation spiral. His meeting was in 15 minutes. "Mr. Harrison, with all due respect, I need to go in. I have important commitments," Tyler insisted, showing his phone with the reservation confirmation. "Important?" Richard examined the phone with disdain. "What kind of scam is this? You think you can waltz in here with some act and I'll believe it?" The manager signaled to 2 security guards who approached immediately. Tyler realized things were getting out of hand. Some guests whispered among themselves, discreetly pointing. "Escort this gentleman to the exit," Richard ordered firmly, "and make sure he understands he's not welcome here." "Wait a minute." Tyler tried to protest, but his voice was cut off. "There's no discussion. This is a high-class establishment, and you clearly don't belong here," Richard declared, raising his voice for all to hear. "Your presence here is inappropriate." From the top of the Italian marble staircase leading to the second floor, a distinguished older man with graying hair and a well-groomed beard silently observed the scene. His eyes held a mix of sadness and something that seemed like assessment. The man held a cup of fine porcelain with coffee but didn't drink, just watched. Tyler felt tears of anger burning his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. He wouldn't give Richard that satisfaction. Instead, he nodded at the security guards. "Fine, I'll leave," he said, maintaining his dignity. "But I'll call the meeting organizer and explain what happened." "Go ahead," Richard replied with a venomous smile. "I'm sure they'll perfectly understand why you weren't allowed in." Tyler walked to the exit with his head held high, ignoring the curious stares. Once on the sidewalk, he pulled out his phone and dialed Henry Williams, the investor who had scheduled the meeting. "Mr. Williams? This is Tyler Johnson. I need to inform you about a problem," he began, but was interrupted. "Tyler, so glad you called. I was just trying to reach you," the voice on the other end said. "We had to move our meeting to another location, a last-minute change." "Move?" Tyler was confused. "But I'm already here at the hotel." "Oh, I'm so sorry, my assistant should have called you this morning. The meeting will now be at the company office on Wall Street. Can you be there in an hour?" Tyler hung up the phone with a strange feeling. It all seemed like too much of a coincidence. He glanced back at the hotel and saw Richard chatting animatedly with another employee, making grand gestures as if telling a funny story. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now back to the story. That night, Tyler couldn't sleep. The meeting had gone well. Better than well, actually. The investors were impressed with his proposal and promised a positive response soon. But the humiliation at the hotel still bothered him. It wasn't just anger. It was a feeling that there was something more behind it all. The next morning, Tyler decided to return to the Grandeur Hotel. This time, he was prepared. He brought all the documents from the original meeting, including the reservation confirmation for the restaurant he had booked to impress the investors. If Richard wanted to play dirty, Tyler would show he could defend himself too. The lobby was bustling when Tyler walked in. Several guests were checking out, while others waited at the reception. The elegant setting with its marble columns and crystal chandeliers was truly intimidating. But this time, Tyler wouldn't let it get to him. "You again?" Richard's voice was sharp as he appeared from behind the reception desk. "I thought I made it clear yesterday you're not welcome here." "I have a valid reservation at the restaurant," Tyler said, showing the documents. "And this time, I brought all the necessary proof." Richard reluctantly took the papers and examined them for a few seconds. His face paled, but he quickly regained his composure. "These documents are fake," he declared loudly enough for other guests to hear. "You're trying to trick me with forged paperwork." "What do you mean, fake?" Tyler couldn't contain his outrage. "I made this reservation myself online. It's backed by my credit card." "I don't care what you say," Richard raised his voice, clearly trying to make a scene. "I'll call the authorities if you don't leave immediately. This is attempted fraud." An older employee organizing papers behind the counter looked up when she heard the argument. She was a woman in her 60s, with graying hair tied in a simple bun and kind eyes. When she saw Tyler, her eyes widened in recognition. She discreetly approached Richard and whispered something in his ear. The manager visibly paled but kept up his aggressive stance. "It doesn't change anything, Mrs. Eleanor," he replied to the employee, though Tyler noticed his voice had lost some of its confidence. "The rules are clear." Tyler saw fear in Richard's eyes, even as he tried to hide it. There was something unsaid here. He decided not to push further for now, but he wouldn't forget this. "Fine," Tyler said calmly, "but this isn't over." In the following days, Tyler quietly began investigating the Grandeur Hotel's management. His contacts in the financial world helped him uncover surprising information. The century-old hotel, once a symbol of excellence in New York City, was facing serious financial trouble. During a conversation with a longtime supplier, Tyler learned that several businesses had been waiting months for overdue payments from the hotel. "It's a messy situation," explained the supplier, an older gentleman who worked with industrial laundries. "We always got paid on time, but lately it's just delays. And when we ask, the manager blames banking system issues." "How long has this been going on?" "About 6 months, more or less. But the strange thing is that the hotel's business seems normal, always full, events happening. I don't understand where the problem is." Tyler continued his investigation and discovered it wasn't just suppliers. Employees were also facing delayed salaries, and some had been mysteriously fired. The hotel's financial situation didn't make sense, given the apparent activity. That's when he found a piece of information that changed everything. Through a contact at an auditing firm, he learned that a group of investors was interested in buying the Grandeur Hotel for a price well below market value. And guess who was negotiating as the middleman? Richard Harrison. The pieces started falling into place in Tyler's mind. Richard wasn't just the manager. He was systematically sabotaging the hotel to force a cheap sale, and Tyler's presence there somehow posed a threat to that plan. 2 weeks after the first incident, Tyler was having coffee at a diner near his office when he was approached by a familiar face. It was Mrs. Eleanor, the employee who had whispered to Richard that day. "May I sit?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Of course, Mrs. Eleanor. How did you know I'd be here?" "I've been keeping track of your routine," she admitted bluntly. "I need to talk to you about something very important." The woman sat down, and Tyler noticed her hands were shaking slightly. She glanced around to make sure no one was listening before speaking. "Do you remember your father, Tyler?" The question caught Tyler completely off guard. His father had passed away 5 years ago, and they'd never been very close. The man had always been private about his work and life. "Of course I remember, but why are you asking?" "Because I worked with him," Mrs. Eleanor said, tears in her eyes. "I worked with Michael Johnson over 20 years ago, when the Grandeur Hotel was truly a symbol of excellence." Tyler fell silent, processing the information. His father had never mentioned working in hotels. He'd always said he worked in administration, but never went into details. "Your father was an incredible man," Mrs. Eleanor continued. "Honest, dedicated, always concerned about the employees. When he left us, so much changed at the hotel. Mrs. Eleanor, I don't understand. My father never told me he worked at the Grandeur Hotel. He had his reasons for keeping certain things secret. She sighed deeply. But Mr. Harrison found out who you were through old photos I still keep on my desk. That's why he's doing this to you. Doing what exactly? Harassing you, humiliating you. He's afraid your presence will raise suspicions about what he's doing to the hotel. Mrs. Eleanor then revealed everything she knew about Richard's schemes. How he had started systematically dismantling the hotel about a year ago, driving away important clients, creating problems with suppliers, firing experienced employees. But why are you telling me this? Tyler asked. Because I can't stay silent anymore, watching the place your father poured so much love into being destroyed like this. She wiped her tears. And because you have the right to know the truth about your family. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, Tyler spent the next few days trying to process all the information Mrs. Eleanor had shared. She had given him some leads on where to find more details about his father's past, including some documents she had kept over the years. He decided to confront Richard, but this time would be different. He gathered all the evidence he had collected about the financial schemes and arranged a meeting in the manager's office, using the excuse that he wanted to apologize for the previous misunderstanding. Richard greeted him with a cynical smile, clearly thinking he had won some kind of battle. So you came here to apologize? Richard said, leaning back in his leather chair. I knew sooner or later you'd understand your place. Actually, I came here to understand a few things, Tyler replied, keeping his composure, especially about my father. Richard's smile vanished instantly. He straightened in his chair, and Tyler could see a bead of sweat forming on his forehead. Your father? What about your father? You knew him, didn't you? Michael Johnson worked here. Lots of people have worked here over the years. Richard tried to sound casual, but his voice was tense. I don't remember everyone. Tyler then placed on the desk some of the old photos Mrs. Eleanor had given him. They were pictures of hotel events, and in several of them, a man Tyler immediately recognized as his father appeared, always alongside others in business attire. I don't remember, Richard insisted, but he couldn't bring himself to look directly at the photos. You're afraid of me, Richard. And now I know why, Tyler leaned forward. My father found out something about you, didn't he? You don't know anything, Richard raised his voice, and if you keep making these accusations, you'll land yourself in serious trouble. What kind of trouble? Tyler didn't back down. The same kind you're causing for the hotel. That was when Richard made a mistake. In his anger, he stood abruptly, and some documents on his desk fell to the floor. Tyler bent down to help pick them up and saw something that made everything clear. They were fake contracts, supply agreements with inflated prices, deals with shell companies, payment records for transactions that never happened. It was all there, clear evidence of the embezzlement Richard had been carrying out for months. You weren't supposed to see that, Richard said, his voice threatening. And if you know what's good for you and for your father's memory, you'll forget everything you saw here. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you. Richard stepped closer. I have information about your father that could destroy his reputation even after his death, things you wouldn't want coming to light. Tyler stood his ground, staring Richard down. For a moment, he felt fear, not of the man in front of him, but of what he might reveal about his father. Then he remembered everything Mrs. Eleanor had told him about Michael Johnson's honesty and dedication. Do what you want, Tyler said firmly, but this ends now. The argument escalated as Tyler pressed Richard about the documents he had seen. The manager denied everything but was visibly rattled. Then a calm, steady voice spoke behind them. I believe I can clarify a few things. Both turned and saw the distinguished grey-haired man who had observed their first encounter in the lobby. He stood in the office doorway, wearing an impeccable suit and a composed but serious expression. Mr. Parker, Richard nearly shouted, clearly shocked and alarmed. I didn't know you were at the hotel today. Andrew Parker, the man introduced himself to Tyler, extending his hand. And you must be Tyler Johnson. Tyler shook his hand, still confused about who he was and how he knew his name. I'm sorry, but I don't know who you are." "I own this hotel," Andrew said calmly, but his words sent a shockwave through the room. Richard turned pale as paper. Tyler simply stared at the man, trying to process the revelation. "And I'm also your father." The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler felt as if the ground had vanished beneath his feet. Richard began to stammer, trying to speak, but no coherent words came out. "This is impossible," Tyler whispered. "My father was Michael Johnson. He passed away 5 years ago." "Michael Johnson was my maiden name," explained Henry, his voice thick with emotion. "When I inherited this hotel from your mother's family, I took the name Andrew Parker to protect both of you from people only interested in money." Tyler collapsed into the chair, unable to stand. His entire life, everything he believed about his family, had been a lie. "You died," Tyler said, tears in his eyes. "I went to your funeral." "No, my son. I faked my own departure to protect you and to uncover who was stealing from the hotel that would be your inheritance." Henry slowly stepped closer. "And for these 5 years I've watched from afar, seeing you become the honest and determined man you are today." Richard tried to slip toward the door, but Henry stopped him with a look. "Mr. Harrison, you're not going anywhere. I've uncovered all your schemes through an audit I've been conducting for months. Every embezzlement, every forged document, every client you deliberately drove away." "Mr. Parker, I can explain everything," Richard began, sweating profusely. "There were some misunderstandings, but I always acted in the hotel's best interest." "Best interest?" Henry picked up some of the documents on the table. "Contracts with shell companies, duplicate payments, employees wrongfully fired. Is that the best interest?" Tyler was still struggling to accept reality. His father was alive. Not just alive, but he had been the owner of the hotel all this time. And he had allowed him to be humiliated like that. "Why did you let him humiliate me?" Tyler asked, his voice breaking. "Why did you let me go through that?" Henry knelt beside Tyler's chair, tears in his eyes. "Because I needed to be sure of who you really were," he admitted, pain in his voice. "For these 5 years, I watched you build your own business without ever asking for help, without ever using the family name. I saw you stay honest even when it meant earning less. But I needed to see how you'd face adversity, whether you'd keep your integrity even when unfairly humiliated." "That was cruel," Tyler pulled away. "You made me suffer just to test me?" "Yes, and it was the worst mistake I've ever made." Henry openly wept now. "I thought I was protecting our legacy, but I nearly lost what mattered most. My son." Mrs. Eleanor appeared at the office door, clearly having heard everything. Tears filled her eyes, and a sad smile touched her lips. "Mrs. Eleanor has been my ally all this time," Henry explained. "She was the one who alerted me to the irregularities Mr. Harrison was committing. And she told me how you handled the humiliation with dignity. I couldn't stay silent any longer, watching Mr. Henry's son being treated that way," Mrs. Eleanor said. "And I couldn't let this hotel, which your father loves so much, be destroyed by this man." Richard tried once more to justify his actions, but Henry firmly cut him off. "Mr. Harrison, you're fired for just cause, and you will be prosecuted for embezzlement and document forgery. Security will escort you out immediately." "You can't do this to me," Richard shouted desperately. "I've dedicated years of my life to this place." "You dedicated years to stealing from this place," Henry corrected, "and trying to sell it to your accomplices for a fraction of its true worth." When Richard was escorted out of the office by security, the room grew heavy with silence. Tyler and Henry were alone, 5 years of separation and misunderstandings between them. "I watched you in every business meeting, in every tough decision you made," Henry said softly. "When you turned down that shady contract with the Newark company, even though you needed the money. When you fired that employee who was lying about his hours, even though he was your friend. You always chose to do the right thing. But why pretend you were dead? Why not just tell me the truth?" "Because your mother and I always wanted you to have a normal life, away from people who'd only get close for their own gain. When she really passed away when you were 16, I promised her you'd grow up being judged on your own merit." Tyler remembered his mother, who had always been discreet about the family's financial situation. She used to say what mattered was being a person of character, no matter how much money you had. The funeral. How did you pull that off? With the help of a few loyal friends and a whole lot of guilt, Henry sighed. I watched from afar. I watched. Saw you cry over an empty casket. It was the hardest day of my life. And these past 5 years, where were you? Here, at the hotel, but under a different name, watching you grow professionally, hurting with every struggle you faced, but knowing you needed to find your own way. Tyler stayed silent for a few minutes, taking it all in. The anger was giving way to a mix of relief and confusion. When I found out Richard had discovered who you were through those old photos, I knew it was time to act, Henry continued. I couldn't let him keep harassing you. How did he find out? Mrs. Eleanor always kept a photo of us on her desk, a picture from the hotel's Christmas party about 10 years ago. You must have been around 15 in it, but the features are clearly the same. Richard started asking questions, digging around, and uncovered the connection. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers out. Now back to the story. Mrs. Eleanor brought water for both men, sensing they needed a moment to process everything that had happened. Your father always spoke of you with such pride, she told Tyler. Even while pretending to be gone, he followed every step of your career. I'm sure he lost sleep many nights worrying if he was doing the right thing. I lost far more than sleep, Henry admitted. There were times I almost gave up on the plan, especially during that rough patch in your company's second year when you nearly went bankrupt. Tyler remembered that time clearly. It had been one of the toughest periods of his professional life. Clients weren't paying, employees were quitting, and he'd even considered shutting down the business. How did you know about that? I kept track of everything. And more than once I thought about stepping in, offering help somehow. But you always found a way, always reinvented yourself. That made me proud, and at the same time made me question whether I was being selfish by keeping my distance. You were, Tyler said bluntly. You were selfish. I had a right to know my own family. Henry lowered his head, accepting the criticism as deserved. You have every right to be angry with me, but I hope one day you can forgive me. Tyler looked at the man in front of him, who was both a stranger and the most important person in his life. The anger was still there, but it was starting to make room for something more complicated. What do you expect from me now? Tyler asked. Nothing, Henry answered honestly. You built your own life, your own career. You have every right to continue without me. I just wanted you to know the truth. And the hotel. The hotel is rightfully yours. It always has been, but I'd understand if you didn't want anything to do with it after all this. Tyler stood and walked to the office window, which overlooked one of New York City's main avenues. The city's bustle carried on as usual, but for him, everything had changed in just a few hours. I need time to process all this, he finally said. Of course, take all the time you need. But first, we need to talk about what Richard did to the hotel. Mrs. Eleanor told me about the employees he fired, the delayed salaries, the unpaid suppliers. I've already started fixing everything, Henry replied. Every honest employee who was wrongfully dismissed will be rehired. Back wages will be paid with interest, and all suppliers will receive what they're owed. And the customers who were driven away? That'll take longer. Richard created all kinds of unnecessary problems, made up issues where there were none, and left people associating the hotel with poor service. Tyler thought for a moment before speaking. I'd like to help with that, he said, surprising even himself. Even after everything? This isn't for you, Tyler said plainly. It's for employees like Mrs. Eleanor, who've always been loyal. And it's for my mother's memory, since apparently this place was part of her life too. Henry smiled for the first time since the truth had come out. Your mother loved this hotel. In fact, it's where we met. She was organizing a charity event in the main hall. She never told me that. Your mother had her share of secrets too, but always out of love, always to protect you. In the weeks that followed, Tyler began working with Henry to restructure the hotel. It was strange, getting to know his father through shared work. They discovered they had different styles but similar values when it came to integrity and quality. Tyler brought modern management and marketing ideas, while Henry contributed his experience and deep knowledge of the hotel's traditions. Mrs. Eleanor was promoted to general manager, a position she'd deserved for years. Slowly, the two men developed not just a professional partnership, but a personal connection. It wasn't the father-son relationship they might have had without all the disappointment between them, but it was something new and genuine. "You know you don't have to work here," Henry said one afternoon as they reviewed renovation plans for one of the halls. "Your company is doing well. You have your own life." "I know," Tyler replied, "but for the first time in years, I feel like I'm doing something that truly matters. It's not just about profit or personal success. It's about restoring something that means a lot to people." "How so?" "The long-time employees who came back, they talk about this place like it's part of their family. Mrs. Eleanor practically raised her kids working here. Mr. Robert from the restaurant developed recipes that have been served for decades. This is bigger than both of us." Henry stopped what he was doing and looked at his son with an expression Tyler couldn't quite decipher. "You've become a better man than I ever imagined," Henry said, "and ironically, it happened in spite of me, not because of me." "Maybe it happened exactly because of how things played out," Tyler reflected. "If I'd grown up knowing I was a hotel heir, maybe I'd never have learned to work hard, to value people for who they are, not what they have." It was a perspective Henry hadn't considered, and it brought some relief to the guilt he carried. One day, 3 months after the revelation, Tyler was in the lobby checking preparations for a major event when he spotted a familiar scene. A young executive was being stopped at the entrance by a new security guard who wasn't yet familiar with the hotel's policies. "I'm sorry, sir, but you don't have a confirmed reservation," the guard said. "But I spoke with management yesterday," the young man protested, visibly nervous. "It's about the tech company event." Tyler approached and immediately recognized the situation. "What's the problem here?" he asked the guard. "This gentleman claims he has business at the hotel but can't verify it." Tyler looked at the young executive, who couldn't have been older than 25, and saw in his eyes the same mix of determination and anxiety he himself had felt months before. "What's your name?" he asked the young man. "Ryan Cooper, sir. I work for the event company organizing tomorrow's conference." Tyler quickly checked the system and found the confirmation. "Everything's in order, Ryan. You can go in. And if you need anything, you can speak to me or Mrs. Eleanor in management." The relief on the young man's face was clear. "Thank you, sir. I was getting worried." After Ryan headed to the elevator, Tyler called the security guard aside. "We need to review our protocols. We don't want anyone feeling disrespected or humiliated here, unless they're actually doing something wrong." "Understood, Mr. Johnson. I'll be more careful." That evening, Tyler told Henry about the incident, which he had witnessed from a distance. "You handled that much better than I would have at your age," Henry remarked. "I learned from experience how humiliating it is to be judged by appearances. And you also learned that how we treat people says more about us than about them." Tyler agreed, thinking about how Richard had revealed himself through his cruel actions and how it had led to his own downfall. "What happened to Richard, by the way?" Tyler asked. "He's being sued, not just by us but by the investors he tried to deceive. Apparently, when they found out the hotel wasn't actually for sale and that he'd fabricated the whole story about financial trouble, they were furious." "Did they lose money?" "They lost the deposit they made based on the false information he provided. Now they're demanding full reimbursement, plus damages." Tyler felt no pity for Richard. The man had chosen his path when he decided to harm so many innocent people out of personal greed. 6 months after the revelation, the Grandeur Hotel was completely renewed, not just physically, but in reputation too. The staff was fully restored, former clients had returned, and new guests kept arriving, drawn by the excellent service. Tyler had made an important decision about his own consulting firm. Instead of abandoning it to work full-time at the hotel, he had found a way to integrate both. "I want to propose something," he said to Henry during a planning meeting. "What if my firm started offering specialized consulting for family-run hotels facing struggles like the ones we went through? You'd use our experience here, as a foundation to help others. Exactly. We learned firsthand how to identify internal issues, restructure teams, and regain client trust. That could be valuable for other owners in similar situations. Henry was thrilled by the idea. That would also mean you'd maintain your professional independence, but we'd still be working together. Yes, and it would mean the hotel would become not just a successful business, but also a model for reclaiming tradition and excellence. The proposal was successfully implemented. Tyler's consulting firm began serving clients in cities across the United States, always applying the principles they'd learned during the Grandeur Hotel's revival. Transparency, respect for employees, a focus on service quality and integrity in every decision. Mrs. Eleanor became an essential part of that consulting team, sharing her decades of hospitality experience with other managers and owners. "I never imagined that at 65 I'd be traveling the country teaching hotel management," she remarked with a laugh after returning from a consulting trip to Miami Beach. "You deserved this opportunity long ago," Tyler said. "Your experience is too valuable to be confined to just one place." The relationship between Tyler and Henry also continued to evolve. It was no longer the traditional father-son dynamic it might have been, but it had become something unique and special. They were business partners but also rediscovered family. "Sometimes I wonder how things might have been different if I'd told the truth from the beginning," Henry reflected one quiet afternoon. "They would have been different, no question," Tyler replied, "but not necessarily better. Maybe I never would have developed the determination I have today. Maybe I never would have learned to value what truly matters." "You don't hold any resentment?" "I have a few scars," Tyler admitted, "but I also have gratitude. I've learned that life rarely goes according to plan, and sometimes the detours take us to better places than we ever imagined." A year after the revelation, the Grandeur Hotel received an award for excellence in hospitality, recognizing not just the quality of service, but also its story of recovery and renewal. At the awards ceremony, Tyler was invited to speak about the hotel's transformation. He looked out at the audience, which included hotel owners from across the country, Grandeur staff, and even some guests who had returned after years of absence. "When I first walked into this hotel a year ago," Tyler began, "I was stopped by someone who judged that I didn't belong here. Today I understand they were right. I didn't belong to that hotel. I belong to this hotel, the one we built together on respect, honesty, and valuing every person who's part of this family." The audience applauded, and Tyler saw tears in Mrs. Eleanor's eyes and in those of many longtime employees who had witnessed the entire transformation. "The biggest lesson I've learned," Tyler continued, "is that a place's true worth isn't in its luxurious furnishings or prime location. It's in the people who choose to work there every day, the values that guide decisions, and how we treat one another, especially in tough times." When he stepped off the stage, Henry was waiting with a proud smile. "Your speech was perfect," Henry said. "I learned from experience," Tyler replied, "and I learned that sometimes we need to go through humiliation to discover our real strength. I still feel guilty for letting you endure that. And I still feel anger sometimes," Tyler admitted. "But I also feel grateful, because in the end, it all brought us here." They looked around the event hall, watching staff and guests interacting with genuine smiles, seeing a place where people truly felt welcome and respected. "Do you think your mother would be proud?" Henry asked. Tyler thought of his mother, who always valued character above all else. "I think she'd be proud of what we've become," said Tyler. "Not just the success of the hotel, but how we've learned to be a family again despite all the complications. And the future, what do you hope for?" "I hope we keep learning, growing, making mistakes, and fixing them together." Tyler smiled. "And I hope others can benefit from our experience, both the successes and the failures." That night, after all the guests had left and the hotel had returned to its normal routine, Tyler and Henry sat in the empty lobby, simply enjoying the peace. "You know what amazes me the most," said Tyler. "What?" "How a situation that started with so much anger and humiliation could turn into something so positive. If Richard hadn't stopped me from entering that day, maybe we'd never have uncovered his schemes, and I'd never have discovered the truth about you." Sometimes the worst things that happen to us are disguises for the best, Henry agreed. Or sometimes people reveal who they really are through their actions, and it ends up bringing justice in ways we never imagined. They sat in silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts about the journey they'd shared. "Tyler," Henry finally said. "Yes? Thank you for giving me a second chance. I know I didn't deserve it." "Everyone deserves a second chance," Tyler replied. "The question is what we do with it." And in that moment, both father and son knew they'd made good use of the second chance life had given them, not just to rebuild their relationship, but to create something new and better than they could have imagined. The Grandeur Hotel became more than a successful business. It became a symbol that it's possible to start over, that integrity always wins in the end, and that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as the toughest challenges. And for Tyler and Henry, it became the bridge that brought them together. Not as they were before, but as they chose to be. A family that learned true love sometimes needs to go through fire to grow stronger. The end of the story. So, what did you think of this story of reunion and overcoming? Do you believe Tyler made the right choice by forgiving his father? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments and where you're watching from. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other moving stories we've prepared for you.